Welcome back to Second Helping. This one on March 1st, 2024. Travis Reier, senior analyst for BamaOnline.com, part of the On3 Sports Network, alongside my great friend and co-host Brent Beaird, a longtime college football analyst for First Coast News in Jacksonville, Florida. Brent, of course, also a voter for the most prestigious individual honor in collegiate athletics, the Heisman Trophy. And Brent, uncharted waters here for Second Helping. Video on the YouTube home for the
That's
first
right.
time, and looking forward to finally taking the plunge. I said before we went on, feels a little bit like the first time I tried to water ski.
Yeah.
You're sitting in the
Yeah.
water and you tell the boat to
Mhm.
hit it, and let's see if we can get up on these babies. I think we'll be fine though.
Oh, yeah. Well, old dogs learn new tricks. So hopefully that will be the case here.
Absolutely. And no shortage of topics because it
No.
is the 1st of March. March Madness, Brent. We've got the NCAA basketball tournament not too far off on the horizon. And of course, we got spring football around the
Yes.
SEC cranking up. That's what we're going to talk about most here today. But as we outlined last week, this evolving college football playoff, 12 teams, 14 teams, what type of scenarios are we talking about when we look ahead to potentially 14 teams in 2026? I know Pete Thamel of ESPN, among others, has done some great reporting on this in the last few days. Boy, if you needed any more sort of confirmation that it's the SEC and Big Ten's
Yeah.
worlds right
Right.
now, the potential for what that deal will look like in 2026 pretty much tells you all you need to know.
Yeah. And again, in review, and this year and next year will be the 5-7, obviously, meaning the five highest ranked conference champions, and then the next highest rated teams in the poll. So we know what we're going to do the next 2 years. What we don't know is what we're going to do after that, starting in 26. Now, they are throwing out there this, instead of the 5-7, Trav, how about a 3-3-2-2-1? That sounds like a defense for somebody,
Sounds like
doesn't
an
it?
old Jerry Tarkanian UNLV amoeba
Yeah,
defense,
yeah,
speaking of
yeah.
March Madness.
That's right. So, but again, guess who would get the 3 and the 3?
Oh,
That
yeah.
would that would be the Big Ten and the SEC. And Trav, I've heard that behind closed doors, there's even a little bit of talk of a 4-4. How about that? So, but again, the logic here for the Big Ten and the SEC is, well, we have the most highest ranked teams, and we have the most money
And eyeballs.
yes. So should we not be able to get the more teams in? And the big thing here is when everybody gets paid, should we get paid more?
And was the unholy alliance at the time, anyway, of the SEC and the Big Ten a few weeks back, was that all just pretty much a precursor to
Yeah,
what we're hearing right now? And also, look, he who has the gold, right? You just
right.
outlined it.
Yes.
And I'm sure the college football playoff doesn't want to think about a scenario where the SEC and the Big Ten says, you know what? We'll just go off and do our own thing.
Yes.
We'll do a
Yes.
6-6 between the
Yeah.
SEC and the Big Ten. We'll do a
Yeah.
12 team just between our two leagues. We
Mhm.
got all the brands.
Yep.
We've
Yep.
got the juice right now.
Well,
So leverage, whereas you would think in previous times wouldn't be so much on the conference side of things, specifically related to the SEC and the Big Ten, they have all of it right now.
yeah, they do. Now, there's some things here that, frankly, in fairness to these two conferences, there's some things here that I get. One is, okay, we waited on the NCAA, we waited on Congress, and really no one's doing anything. So we're going to start doing something ourselves. We hope that doesn't mean that we have to pull away entirely from the NCAA. But I think, Trav, this is also a shot across the bow about Well, someone's got to be able to rein in or have at least a better control. I understand the market the way that it is, but we need to have some kind of a little more self control and control for the transfer portal in the NIL and some issues that may never be able to be dealt with. So, look, I get the playoffs. I get why they want more money. I get why they want more representation. But Trav, I think some of this has to be some of these thorny issues right now that they're seeing no one else is dealing with. So we better start dealing with them before we get really left behind.
It's a great point. And you still think about what conferences could even look like in 2 years.
Yeah,
Florida State
really.
trying to get out of the ACC, how that league might look. That league might go
Right.
from a two bid league to a one,
Yes.
especially if a 4-4 type of situation eventually goes into play for the SEC and the Big Ten. And then how that lays out from a schedule perspective in a
Sure.
playoff with 14 teams, and who qualifies for buys. Does the SEC and the Big Ten sling their weight around, flex their muscles, even in scheduling format? And we've also heard about signing day adjustments that I
Yes.
think are a big part of this too, kind of a byproduct of this oncoming expanded and continuing to expand college football playoff. Your thoughts on that, Brent? A third signing date, perhaps one in June, one on the Wednesday following the
Right.
completion of the regular season, and then another on the traditional first Wednesday in February date. Yeah, changes. They are coming.
Well, for some folks who are new to second helpings, Travis and I have been together since the early '90s, and particularly as far as recruiting is concerned, and seen some changes that happened almost overnight, and some that were like a glacier that took years. Now, I do agree they've got to get all this off of December. The calendar right now is ridiculous. And unfortunately, the coaches have made this themselves. And they've got to untangle a lot of these wires. And one of the things they've got to do is with signing day. I like having a signing day in summer. I know that might drive high school coaches crazy, and we need to get some input from them on this. But I think we're going to do a summer. Would it not be better to maybe do it in July or August? I would say take it off altogether in December and leave the first Wednesday in February. I think that way, Trav, it may mean a little bit more. So I don't know if they're getting it with three signing periods. I'm glad they're actually doing something with this because, as you've now talked before, this calendar's got to change because it's total chaos right now in December.
It really is. And I guess one of the pros to having a December signing date is you have all these early enrollees. You have all these mid-year guys now that are
Yes,
jumping into college
yes,
football and college athletics mid-year. January enrollees. You can look at places around the SEC as we get spring practices started up. Well, you've got classes now where it's more about who isn't coming
yeah,
in
really,
January than who is, because the vast majority at a lot of places they're bringing in those signees to get that early jump on things. And so that would be one aspect of it, I guess, in terms of promoting a continuance of a signing date either in November, December, because you can transition that, I guess, more
sure,
into the early enrollees, which is
yeah,
all the rage right now. So some things to figure out for sure. And as we talked about, spring practice getting underway around the Southeastern Conference. And when I think of spring football, Brent, I think of a couple things. Storylines. You think about the SEC right now, you got Texas and
hmm,
Oklahoma coming
that's
into the
right,
league. You
yeah,
got new coaches at what were previously Western Division programs like Mississippi State, Texas A&M, and Alabama. And when I think about new coaches, I think about situations that are tethered. And to me, head coaches and quarterbacks at any level, That's pretty much where you go. And so we'll tie those two together as we outline quarterback competitions of note around the league. And we'll start with one where I don't think there's much of a competition going into this, but I do think it's an intriguing dynamic because you have Graham Mertz coming back for the Florida Gators, but then you bring in the National Player of the Year in multiple circles, Brent, and DJ Lagway. Kind of what's your expectation for that situation as we move through spring and look ahead to the season?
Well, I think the ultimate situation there would be for Lagway to, I don't know if you give him a package every game or what you do with that, but that he can learn under Mertz. I think that would be very helpful to be able to do so. Now, again, we're not quite sure what's going to happen with is Billy Napier still calling plays. Dan Enos, the well-traveled one, who's been in Arkansas a couple of times, even in Alabama. Now, again, he's been in various positions from an analyst to an on-the-field coach at that point, too. And Russ Callaway has been promoted from tight ends coach, or maybe he still will be coaching tight ends, to kind of a co-offensive coordinator. And look, Trav, you hear from Gator fans like I do at the gym and at church and the neighborhood and whatever. And this is one of the major concerns that they've got. What I'm hearing is, look, we've got two good quarterbacks. We think we've got a running game that's going to be pretty good, even though ETN went to Georgia. And we hope this offensive line is going to be better. We've got 5 games early on that we ought to be either 5-0 or 4-1. So, Trev, I've like you have probably, I've heard all kinds of predictions from this being a total disaster to where this stuff comes together at some point, and these two quarterbacks work hand in hand.
Yeah, I thought the real silver lining for Florida in 2023 was the play of Graham Mertz.
Yes.
I kind of cringe to think about what that record would have looked like
man.
had he not been the guy. That could have been a 3-win team, maybe.
Maybe.
So I don't think they win that. They don't come back at South Carolina, I don't think,
No.
without Graham Mertz. So there's one right there. Yeah, Lagway, I could see him in a role similar to Tebow in 2006. Remember how they packaged up Tebow to go along with that situation that they had back in 2006, won a national championship that season. So maybe Lagway feels that type of role. But Mertz to me is the guy. And you do have some, even with Etienne moving on, you have some promising skill guys that you're looking at and continuing to implement around the quarterback position. What about South Carolina? Because Spencer Rattler moves on to the National Football League. And I recently saw some comments from Shane Beamer where he essentially said, I think we're better right now than we were against Clemson in our last regular season game, everywhere except quarterback. Well, Shane, that's kind of important. So, Lenoris Sellers, Dante Reno, what a great name. Reminds me of Reno Hightower from the movie Best of Times. And then Robbie Ashford comes in from Auburn as a transfer. I guess Davis Bevel comes in from Oklahoma as a walk-on. Boy, that one could go any number of ways. Safe to say right now, though, I don't think South Carolina is going to have the puncher's chance at quarterback like it had with Spencer Rattler, a guy who could cover for some deficiencies. He was going to make a few mistakes, but I thought Rattler was really, really good in his 2 seasons for the Gamecocks.
And look, the other thing is Rattler is going to be good in the NFL too.
I think so.
I have no doubt about that. Matter of fact, he's turning some heads there. But as far as South Carolina is concerned, I mean, they are still. They finally got this class. The coaches settled. They had some guys who were coming and going, so that's been a problem for them. Frankly, I thought Elliott coming over from the state of Georgia
State, head coach,
was interesting. He was an example, again, as Travis said, of a head coach wanting to be on the staff, and obviously
Aligning
being
themselves with the power 2, power
yeah.
3, power 4, whatever it is these days.
And listen, the thing that gets to me with this is he had some real success. Beamer did. Trav, you remember that in those first couple of years, beating Clemson, South Carolina, Florida in November. Well, the equity from that, do you think is about to wear off? I think, and I'm not being dramatic here saying they'll fire him, because I don't think they will, but they need to get back this year to show some progress.
They do. And offensively, when you're bringing in Robbie Ashford
Yeah,
and potentially going to have him on the field, when you think about the options otherwise, it makes me wonder how dramatic the shift in approach on
really.
offense is going to be, going from Spencer Rattler to maybe more of a quarterback run offense with what the Gamecocks are going to have at their disposal behind center. What about Texas A&M? Because for Connor Weigman, it was a disappointment in 2023. Obviously, that had to do with the foot injury he sustained, played in 7 or 8 games, but went through a couple of quarterbacks. Max Johnson had his ribs broken at Ole Miss. He has since moved on once again via the transfer portal. Jalen Henderson, though, stepped in there and played some good football, I thought, for the Aggies. And even with Evan Stewart off to Oregon at the wide receiver position, I think whether it's Weigman, maybe it's Summer Henderson, because you've got a new head coach, you got
Yeah,
a new offensive coordinator, you got a new offense going in. Weigman's primarily a pocket guy. Henderson can do some things with his legs. I think A&M still has a chance to be pretty good at the most important position on the field.
yeah, I would agree with that. And I like Weigman. Obviously, he got hurt last year. And I think Colin Klein, coordinator, can be able to use these quarterbacks. Trev, I like Elko. I think Elko can do some things with them that they did not get done under Fisher, or at least they're going to do it a little more quietly than they did under Fisher. Look, my big concern for them, though, or the guys that they have lost on that defensive line. And that's something very important for you and I for years. That's how important that defensive line is.
They
And
hit
look,
free agency, a lot of
no
that
doubt.
defensive line,
No, and you lose a guy like Walter Nolan to Ole Miss,
free agent.
and that is that's a real problem for them. Now they do get Nick Skirton, a defensive end, who is coming over from Purdue, so that will help them somewhat. But do you share the concerns I do for their defense as much as probably more than their offense?
I do, but that's where I think Elko coming in can
Yeah,
help stabilize things, because
true,
obviously a defensive guy. But they're going to have to score some points. I don't
no
think
doubt.
there's any doubt about that. And I think Klein's approach to offense could help their defense,
Yes.
because they're not going to be, even if it is Weigman, I don't think ideally they're going to be a 35 plus pass attempt
No,
offense. They're
no.
still, and they've got some backs. They've still got some backs. They've got to stabilize that offensive line. They weren't good enough. They had a couple of young tackles last season, had some injuries. So that's where it starts, I think, for them as much as anything on the offensive side, too. Arkansas, it goes without saying, a huge, not only upcoming season for Sam Pittman in terms of his employment status there in Fayetteville. I think the first 5 or 6 games,
Oh, yeah,
we're past the point where
absolutely.
we would say, okay, we'll get to the end of next season, and then by the end of November, we'll know. No, we're seeing more and more. You don't get off to a good start in a season where you're already feeling the
Oh,
heat.
yeah,
There's a
right.
chance you don't get to November. So Boise State transfer Talon Green has been brought in. You got Bobby Petrino making his way from Texas A&M back to Arkansas to coordinate that offense, and
Yeah,
just as importantly, continue to develop Green, whose best statistical season came as a redshirt freshman in Boise a couple of seasons ago. He threw for 2,042 yards, 14 touchdowns, also ran the football effectively. So, in some ways, you could see a little bit of a revert to what we saw from KJ Jefferson
yeah.
a couple of years ago when they didn't try to pro style him up like last season as much. But either way, a lot of this with Sam Pittman and his future going to rest on that ability of Taylon Green, it appears.
Well, and look, I'll go with Green, and I will add that offensive line to it, Travis.
Yeah, they were
That
terrible.
that line last year was abysmal, and one of the things that Pittman talked about over and over again when you talk about 24 is we've got to fix the offensive line. And look, he is a guy who obviously appreciates the offensive line. That's a big deal for him. That, and to me, there's going to be more pressure to fix that line, Travis, than there is for as far as what Green is going to be able to do. I think they'll be able to run the ball. I like Petrino. And frankly, I think if Petrino would have had a free hand at A&M, he may have done a lot better there too. But he is, but with him being back home, I think he brings some promise to Green. And again, I think they'll find some receivers, but I'm very concerned about that offensive line.
Yeah, Petrino returning to the scene of the crime, so to speak,
Yeah.
raised more than a few eyebrows. I get that, but
Yes.
I commend Sam Pittman. I mean, it's do or die time.
Sure it
It's
is.
chips to the middle of the table time for Sam Pittman, and you do what you got to do. So if you're bringing in a new quarterback that has starting experience at the G5 level, and you can get a guy like Bobby Petrino, who no one questions, as you alluded to, his ability to work with that position and coordinate an offense, you ride with it, so to speak, with Bobby Petrino. LSU, Garrett Nussmeier is the exception to the rule here of late with the transfer
Really.
portal and the mobility that players have. I think either of the last 2 years, Garrett Nussmeier could have transferred into a starting role somewhere
No,
else.
no question.
Not just last year, I think even the previous season. But now with Jaden Daniels off to the NFL, it's Nussmeier's time. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I guess as much as anything, you lose some big pieces at the wide receiver position. But so, in addition to Nussmeier, what are you looking at for storylines for LSU, which is undergoing a good bit of staff change when
It
you talk
is.
about that defensive side?
Well, look, to me, that is where Brian Kelly showed us, Trav, didn't he? Okay, if we're going to make a run at this thing, we've got to fix this defense. So he brings Blake Baker over from Missouri, who did, I thought, a terrific job. But my Stars, they were 118 in the nation last year in pass defense. As you and I saw every week, I mean, they were
Terrible.
absolutely abysmal and just got abused the entire year. I mean, they've got some guys that they really like. Whit Weeks at linebacker and Savion Jones at defensive line, who I know you've talked about, Javion Tovano. Those are other guys. And I think he feels pretty good about where they're going with the passing game. And you know good and well that they've got backs coming back. But this is it. They if Kelly is going to progress the way he wants to at LSU, they've got to rebuild this defense. They are definitely on the way to do that. And also remember, Trav, they bring in Corey Raymond, also from Florida, with that also. And to me, the bigger one maybe than Blake Baker, one that Travis and I were quite familiar with, Bo Davis comes
Yeah.
over from Texas, who I think Bo Davis is the best defensive line coach, not in the SEC, but in the nation.
Yeah, the DL whisperer, Bo
Yeah.
Davis, coming
Yeah.
over
Yeah.
from the University of Texas. Yeah, I mean, it's set up for LSU, even with Daniels moving on to the NFL to take that next step, as you said, under Brian Kelly. Now, we're going to include Oklahoma in this. Feels a
Yep.
little weird
Yep.
to talk about
It does.
Oklahoma in
It
relation
does.
to our SEC spring storylines, but Dylan Gabriel off to Oregon. Jackson Arnold, the former 5-star, going to step in there. Completed 26 of 45 for 361 and 2 touchdowns in the Sooners Alamo Bowl loss to the Arizona Wildcats. He also threw 3 interceptions. So, a little bit of a up and down start for Jackson Arnold in that bowl loss to Arizona, but all in all, future appears bright for Oklahoma still at the quarterback position, even with Gabriel moving on.
Yeah, they love him, and you listen. You don't see any quarterback list without Arnold being mentioned in that list. But my concern for them is similar to my concern about LSU. And when you've got a head coach that's an expert at defense, at some point that they will get better, I believe. So, but that's going to be fascinating. I mean, seeing Oklahoma and Texas at media days coming up, seeing them join the SEC is now Oklahoma's coming. They won't have that arrogance, Trav, that Texas is bringing, but they are certainly excited about being in the league.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. And also, obviously, a new offensive coordinator at OU with Jeff Lebby.
Yes.
Moving on to
Yes.
Mississippi State as the head coach, who we'll talk about here in just a little bit. The Auburn Tigers got spring practice underway this week. Peyton Thorne back at the quarterback position. I don't know if it was the strongest endorsement from Hugh Freeze when he referred to the
Yeah.
situation
Yeah.
as thorns to
Right.
lose.
Yeah.
But it does appear, even after the horrendous bowl performance for the Auburn Tigers in Nashville against Maryland, it is still the Michigan State transfer Peyton Thorne who is leading the way early in spring drills. But also sounds like Freeze likes some of his younger options, including Hank Brown and then
Yes.
a true freshman in Walker White.
Yeah, they really like White. They've been very impressed with White and what he's done. I'll be honest with you, Travis. I'm not impressed with Peyton Thorne. I don't think the coordinators in the league are sitting up at night. But Freeze thinks that he can be better. And by the way, we're all shocked that Hugh is going to call the plays this year, Trav, instead of dumping
Well, I
that
mean,
in.
after you throw your staff under the
Yeah,
bus like
yeah,
you did after the bowl game, you kind of have to, don't you?
yeah, you do. You do. Yeah, there's no doubt about that. Now, Jarquez Hunter, who Travis and I both like, is one of the better running backs in the
Really
league. He
is.
will come back. Damari Alston had his moments. Jeremiah Cobb. Now, where they're really excited, and I mean really excited, is in the wide receivers.
Knocked it out
And
of the park in the
yes,
recruiting. Yeah.
in the two Cams and Camden Brown and Cam Coleman. These are some of the better receivers that Auburn has had in quite some time. I still think they've got to fix this line of scrimmage, Trav, on both sides. Gus Malzahn did no one any favors, and neither did Brian Harsin. And recruiting with the on the line of scrimmage. But I'll be fascinated to see White, Hunter, and really interested in seeing Trav, both the Cams, as I like to call them, at wide receiver.
Yeah, Peyton Thorne isn't a lift all boats kind of
Yeah,
quarterback or
yeah,
talent. But if we're being fair, Auburn had bottom of the league wide receiver options
they
in
did.
2023. So you put this injection of talent around Peyton Thorne to go along with Hunter, who I think is going to have probably a 1,300-yard type of season if he stays
Yes,
healthy,
yes,
then the outlook changes perhaps a good bit. And that's obviously something that I think Hugh Freeze is projecting that, okay, I'm not gonna knee jerk here, especially with the way the season ended. I think what we have coming in and the continuation of what we have at some other spots, Peyton Thorne's going to look a good bit better in 2024. What about the Kentucky Wildcats, boy? Boy, Mark Stoops, he lives in that portal when it comes to
he does,
quarterbacks,
Jody.
doesn't he? It's worked out pretty well from Will Levis to Devin Leary. And now I guess it's Brock Vandegrift's turn
That's right. Oh
behind
yeah.
center of the Georgia transfer. It looks like there's a pretty clear path to him being the guy for Big Blue.
I don't. Yeah, and look, the truth of the matter is, we know he's probably learned a lot from Georgia, and being on that team of the last few years behind Carson Beck and Stetson Bennett. So he finally gets his chance. And Vandegrift is a good dual threat guy. Leary last year was okay, but they still struggled at that point too. So I'll be fascinated to see. They were man, they were 11th in passing in the league last year, 211 yards. So they've got to get that going again. That's going to be interesting. New offensive coordinator, Bush Hamdan, is coming in. This is a big spring for Kentucky. And Trav, there are a lot of teams in the league. Bama's won, certainly Florida. I think Kentucky is. That spring is going to be meaningful. We just kind of wave spring off a little bit, but these guys have got to get used to new systems, new coordinators, and Kentucky's one of those.
Yeah, some places it feels like 15 spring practices are just enough, or maybe even a few too many.
Right.
And then there are other places, like the next place we're going to talk about, where you think Clark Lee, heading into a big season at Vanderbilt, would like to have probably twice as many opportunities in the spring. And you start just with the quarterback position, where the Commodores had brought in Utah transfer Nate Johnson, and that was just one of the guys. My favorite, Diego Pava, the quarterback from New Mexico State, coming in. If you saw the Auburn, New Mexico State game last November, this dude's like a mini Tebow. I mean, you look at him, he doesn't look like a quarterback, but what I saw from him at Jordan-Hare Stadium was just a grittiness, a toughness, and also some playmaking ability. And New Mexico State apparently popular with Clark Lee, because he brings in the former head coach, Jerry Kill, as a consultant, added the offensive coordinator from New Mexico State, the safeties coach from New Mexico State, and Pava's just one of two in MSU quarterbacks to make the move to Nashville.
Pavich is a really good quarterback. I love Jerry Kill. Everywhere he's been, he just kind of lays it out and tells it like it is, and you got to appreciate guys like that. Now, I know you were there recently, and the main thing that impresses me about what Vanderbilt's doing is spending $300 million on facilities that are badly needed. But look, with that said, and I think Clark Lee's a decent football coach. I think he showed it his first year. I think they took a step back last year. But Trav, the problem is for teams like Vandy, when you bring in Oklahoma and Texas and whoever the SEC is going to bring in the next few years, and that's going to happen with further expansion, it certainly doesn't help the Vanderbilt of the SEC, does it?
No, and you're right. It is impressive what Vanderbilt's finally committing to from a stadium and facility perspective, but you're also dealing with that throughout the course of a season logistically. From afar, we look at it and go, you just deal with it. Well, it makes a difference, but it's a big year for Clark Lee, and it does start at the quarterback position. I love Diego Pava. I'm interested to see how that all plays out, just like I am about the situation at Mississippi State. We talked about Jeff Lebby making the move from OU to MSU as the successor to Zach Arnett, a cameo for Arnett as head coach there in Starkville. Will Rogers off to Washington, which is interesting to me, because when I look at Will Rogers, I think he might be a pretty good fit for Jeff Lebby in an offense. But Blake Shapen comes in from Baylor. It was believed he was kind of a fallback option in the Dylan Gabriel sweepstakes. There was some hope anyway that maybe Gabriel would end up at Mississippi State. I'm sure NIL played a role in his decision to go to Oregon instead. You've got a second-year quarterback in Chris Parson in that mix. And then Lebby's able to sign late Michael Van Buren as an early enrollee. You got Arizona State on the road in week 2 to get the Lebby tenure kind of going. So options at the quarterback position, I guess it starts with Shapen because he played so much and played effectively in stretches for Baylor, but some other things to answer there as well.
Well, and the other things that I'm interested in is how many of Arnett's recruits are back on defense, and will they? And look, they've been pretty salty on defense, and that's kept them in some games, and I think that's going to be fascinating. But one thing we won't have, Travis, is Will Rogers in the wrong offense. He goes from uh, the um, uh, the offense he had under Mike Leach, which fit him like a glove. If they can get that straightened out this year with their quarterback, they'll be making progress compared to what they did last year.
Yeah, I'm not going to sit here and try to sell Will Rogers as an exceptionally talented or future NFL quarterback. I think he was scheme dependent. I think he was very much a guy that needed to be in an air raid type of approach. What Arnett tried to implement did not fit him at all. So with Jed Fish out there in Seattle, I'll be keeping an eye on Will Rogers in that
Yes.
offense. But yeah, it looks like Shapen will be the guy. Very fascinating opening season on the horizon for Jeff Lebby. What about Alabama when it comes to the quarterback position with the coaching change, with Jalen Milroe finishing the season not so much on a strong note because it wasn't especially good. Not all of that his fault. They had continuous shotgun snap issues. I don't know any quarterback, regardless of skill level,
Right,
that
right.
can perform on a highly consistent basis in that type of scenario. Um, but it is an offense, as we saw with Michael Penix Jr. at Washington last season. He threw for nearly 5,000 yards, Brent, in this Kalen
Yeah.
DeBoer offense. When you think about just from a standpoint of fit, and you think about what DeBoer has done previously at Fresno State and Washington, among other places, is it more of a situation where DeBoer is going to have to adapt a little bit to Milroe, or is it going to be more on Milroe to continue to take a couple of strides in terms of his passing acumen?
I think it's going to be a little bit of both, but I think a lot of this is going to be on Milroe. He's going to make quicker decisions. He's going to recognize the defense quicker than he has. We know he can throw a good deep ball. We know what he can do with his legs, but Trev, his issue is the short to intermediate passing routes. Now, Jeremy Bernard coming over from Washington, I believe, is going to be a help. They obviously won't have Jermaine Burton and Isaiah Bond and Malik Benson. Those guys are gone. But look, and as you write about these guys every day, I mean Kendrick Law and Kobe Prentice and Jalen Hall and Emmanuel Henderson, Ryan Williams coming in. I think whoever the quarterback is going to be, and I guess at this point, obviously, Milroe is the incumbent here. But I'm going to be fascinating to see what these other guys do with, and you've got to believe Ty Simpson could very well have a new lease on life. And Bama's got as good a quarterback room, Trav, as anybody in the league does.
Washington surrendered 37 fewer sacks in one more game than Alabama did a year ago. Washington was tied for sixth in FBS in sacks allowed. Alabama was tied for 129th out of 133 teams
Yeah.
in FBS football. Now, again, some of that had to do with shotgun snaps. Some of it had to do with an offensive tackle situation on the left side where you were playing a true freshman. Absolutely, it did. But certainly some of it also had to do with Jalen Milroe not getting the ball out.
Yes.
And whereas Washington's offensive line did win the Joe Moore Award in 2023 as the best offensive line in college football, as much or more of it had to do with an offense and a passing game that is predicated on recognition and getting the ball out on time and accurately. And so, as you said, there's a little bit of everything involved here. And certainly some of that's going to have to do with Jalen Milroe and how he adapts to these concepts and his personal development and if he's able to continue to take those needed strides. Hey, Brent, you talked about this earlier, but we do have something that we wanted to get into here later in the program. Big D is on the clock for 2024 SEC Media Days. I know you're already counting it down. They
Right.
went ahead and gave us our daily schedule
Mm-hmm.
for July and how that's going to work out from a coaches and team representation. perspective. So, with that in hand now, is there a particular day in Dallas that you're excited about, or maybe a coach that you're interested in hearing from, or a player that possibly might be making that trip?
Oh, I think everybody wants to hear about DeBoer. He's in Wednesday, and I believe Napier is in that day too. Now, obviously, the Texas contingent will be fascinating to hear from Sarkisian. I do wonder if Jerry Jones makes an appearance somehow, Travis, sometime during the week, but it will be. I don't necessarily want to use the word circus, but it will probably be pretty close to that in terms of the excitement about what you've got going on, and Trav, the other situation is they will be lined up out the door when Greg Sankey starts talking about the playoffs and leaving the league and some of the things that you and I talked about. So if you put all that together, what a week it's going to be.
Yeah, Hoover sets the standard, as we know.
Yep,
So it'll
that's
be
right.
interesting. They say everything's bigger in Texas. We're going to find out when it comes to
Yep,
SEC Media
we
Days
will.
coming up in July. Brent, any other news and notes as we get out of here?
One thing we haven't talked about a whole lot, and I do think they'll be fine, is there's been a little bit of talk about, well, Georgia's losing a lot of these coaches, and is that going to affect them? My answer to that very quickly is no. The one that caught my eye is a guy that you and I have frankly talked about for years, Travis James Coley. Now, the well-traveled one again, who's been at Miami and Florida State and so forth. And look, being a disciple of Nick Saban, people need to remember there's nothing Kirby does that doesn't involve recruiting. And they wanted to get more in that South Florida area. So James Coley was a logical choice for Kirby.
Yeah, it's an incestuous business.
It is, isn't
There's
it?
no doubt about it. Very
Yes.
fraternal. The networking, the connections that you make
Yep.
at very early stages in your career can last you a lifetime. We see it
Absolutely.
not only in college football, but in the National Football League as well. I talk to folks that work in the NFL and they say, you wouldn't believe some of the folks that have been in high ranking executive level positions, coordinators, maybe even head coaches that ascend to that level in large part based on networking and connections. Hey, Brent, always great stuff with us here on Second Helping, the podcast, and now YouTube show of choice for college football fans around the globe. Hey, if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube page as of yet, the YouTube channel at Travis Reier, F as in Frank, S as in Steve, T as in Tom, at Travis Reier, FST, the FST for, well, of course, food, sports, and travel. And we'll have you covered with Second Helping here on a consistent basis. Might also, Brent, have some Pops content coming
Oh,
up
hey,
on the
Trev,
expanding channel here.
I've got to ask before we go because I know people want to know Valentine's not too far away in the rearview mirror. Did Pop step up for Valentine's, Trev?
He did good by Pop standards. He actually got Nana some Stover's chocolate.
Oh
Which
my!
I've always said nothing says it's over like Russell Stover because it's so basic. But for
Yeah,
Pops, I mean that's pretty damn good.
it is.
So we'll give him some
Yes.
credit for that as we get out of here. Hey Brent, enjoyed it, my man. Look forward to doing it again next week.
Me too. And Trev, between now and then, who in the world knows what might happen, right?
34 team playoff by next week.
Woo!
It'll just keep multiplying as we get closer to, well, spring games
That's right.
around the SEC as well. Hey, we got a guest star
We
here. I like it.
do. We do. He was
The show cat.
Yeah, this is Chino.
All right, Chino.
He would Trav. He was napping about half the morning. So
what's all this racket about?
yeah, that's right. He wants if he can get a little a little talk on the podcast too.
Yeah, we'll have to do like a Chino's picks,
Yeah,
maybe in the fall,
absolutely.
and
I
get
think that's
Chino
a
to do
great
some picks
idea.
for us. All right, Brent, we'll talk soon.
I look forward to it, pal. Take care.
Hey, thanks for joining us right here for Second Helping. For Brent Beaird, Travis Reier. Until next time,